every single one of our major customers and minor customers all shut their doors overnight.
You need the right people in the right place at the right time. And sometimes you have the right people in the right place, but at the wrong time.
I've got to keep going forward. I've got to keep looking for revenue streams. I've got to keep looking for growth, keep looking at new ways of doing things.
But, what's the culture like at the business? What do we stand for, the values?
I've got to tick that box on my personal development program I don't really want to be here.
Scaling up a business isn't easy. If it were, we wouldn't have less than 4% of businesses scaling beyond 10 employees or around £1 million turnover level, and less than 1% beyond 50 employees. But the contribution that we make as owner-managers to our economies is immense and should never be underestimated. Yet it can be a tough gig for all of us at times, and only other business owners truly understand the challenges that we face. And through ScaleUp Radio, we aim to help make things a little easier. We interview guests who have been where you are now and may have faced some of the challenges that you are facing. And they offer their thoughts and advice on what has worked for them, as well as what didn't. And we've also combined many of the lessons from these interviews and also through working with hundreds of owner managers over the last 10 years or so into a practical scale-up handbook that we've called the Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System, or ESUS. And it's for owner managers like you and me as we navigate our own scale-up journey. And you can order a copy through your favorite online book retailer or by going to all the W's, esusgroup.co.uk, www.esusgroup.co.uk. On this week's episode of ScaleUp Radio, we look around the whole idea of measuring engagement and team happiness, if you like. And it's all about the communication between you as the business owner, the leaders of your business, and your team, and making sure that you have a system in place to track engagement and a process for ensuring that you follow up on any feedback that you receive. And essentially, it's all around fostering great engagement and that great culture within the business. But this is particularly around how you might think about measuring that engagement. If you've listened to previous episodes of ScaleUp Radio, then you'll know that we talk about 4 pillars of scaling up our businesses, those being strategy, cash, execution, and people. And measuring engagement and feedback comes from that people section. And within the presentation, we discuss all sorts of things, such as why you need to measure engagement and have a process in place in the first place for gathering feedback from your team. And that's no matter really how large or small your team is, although the way you go about it might well change depending on whether you've just got a couple of team members or whether you've got tens of people in your teams. We also talk about what can you be doing that maybe you're not doing, but also what are you already doing and how you can improve it, and also when that feedback needs to change and when you maybe stop looking at everyone's feedback and maybe you're focusing a little bit more on your direct reports. You'll also hear from George Blakeway, and he's from Team Performance Scan, and he's got a lot of experience in working with very high performance teams. And he talks about how engagement and feedback within your businesses can be implemented and the benefits that it has. As well as the presentation, we have a couple of group discussions with a panel of business owners who share their own experiences and thoughts when it comes to dealing with engagement within their teams. And they talk about the powerful effect that engagement and feedback has and some of the practicalities that they're facing. As always, there are lots of tools and resources that we mention within this episode. And if you'd like copies of these, then please use the link in the show notes. And there's some honest to goodness, real practical advice in this episode about engagement and feedback when it comes to your business. So I encourage you to have a listen. This time around, we're looking at the idea of feedback, but particularly around listening to our staff and tracking engagement. So we're looking at the whole idea of engagement. These are some of the checks that we have within our system, within our in-flight checks. So are we regularly seeking ongoing feedback from team members? Do we have a kind of balance wheel? I'll talk a little bit about that, not a lot today, but do we have something that allows us to have a kind of retention discussion or a happiness or engagement discussion, if you like, with our team on a regular basis? And are we tracking feedback? Do we have something in place where we're asking for feedback, but also then following through on it? And the main focus of today really is around how are we tracking and working to improve employee engagement levels. So we'll look at a couple of things along those lines. So that's what we'll be looking at. Why is engagement important? Some of us here will have maybe no employees or one or two employees. Others of us have got tens of employees. So clearly there's a little bit of a different focus of the way that we might look at things. But in ScaleUp do a lot of work in this area, and they've classified or recognized the fact that essentially there are three types of employees from an engagement perspective. We've got those that are really engaged and really do feel the passion and have that profound connection with the business. We've got a number of people that are just not engaged. They're then more of a 9-to-5er type person. And there's a small number of people, but still a reasonably significant number that are actively disengaged. And of course, these are the ones that are really unhappy at work and can be the kind of terrorists in our organizations. So it might be worth thinking about that, because of course, clearly what we'd love is that we had many more people that are fully engaged and reduce the sections of the others. And from our own research that we did with a number of business owners across the country, we know that as we start to employ, as we get to teams of 3 to 5 or more, then the main challenge that comes across for us all is getting staff to think and act for themselves and take responsibility in a way that we would like. So essentially coming down to team engagement. And I think, intuitively, we all know, and we've all heard things about, culture eats strategy for breakfast, all great stuff about how the most important asset in our businesses are our teams. So, but as this little slide shows, the majority of us, vast majority, do think engagement strategy has an impact on our business success, but actually very few of us have a strategy for addressing it. And again, going back to our own research, when we looked at the top reported key performance indicators that we're measuring, only about 4% of them are related to staff. So there's a disconnect, if you like. We all intuitively know that our team are a really important asset, but are we really focusing on that and looking for ways to improve engagement, measure it, and really get the power of our teams, harness the power of our teams and get them working? And does it have an effect? Well, again, going back to some of the ScaleUp research, businesses with highly engaged teams are more profitable. They show a reduced employee turnover and a significant reduction in absenteeism. And there's lots of other data, including things like health and safety incidents at work are reduced. So it does have an effect on the bottom line. So those of us that think it's kind of a bit more soft and woolly aspect of business, it isn't. It has a really powerful effect on the bottom line. So we know that that's important. We know that developing the right culture is really important for all sorts of aspects. So how do we go about measuring it and starting to think about things that we could do within our businesses to improve the engagement? And as I say, the main focus of this session is around a couple of ways to measure. And depending on how many team members we've got, we may want a mix of qualitative and quantitative type research. If we've got lots of members of staff, we might think more about the tracking particular numbers and looking at that point of view. If we've only got a couple, then doing a survey and getting a number out of it might be less appropriate. We might want to do a bit more qualitative. So one of the things that is a really good habit to get into is the idea of a very regular stop, start, continue discussion with our team members, with each team member. So ideally on a weekly basis, each of us, whether we're a leader or manager within the business, should be trying to have at least one stop, start, continue discussion with an employee. So what sort of things should we start doing that we're not doing? What sort of things are we doing now that actually we just don't think are giving what we need and maybe are a waste of time that we should stop doing? And what sort of things are we doing that are starting to work well that we should continue and do more of? So whilst that's not a quantitative measure, it's giving us a little bit of insights into what our team are thinking and constant ideas. And we would just suggest that you would build this into your weekly team meetings and ask people to bring to that meeting the results of any discussions they've had with employees around stop, start, and continue. So nice, simple thing that all of us can do, whatever size of business that we're running. I mentioned the balance wheel, and this comes from a concept that there's a company called County Batteries that in Nottingham that have really embedded this, and they have a discussion they do it every month actually with every employee, and they ask them to rate themselves on these 8 key things. So from a family perspective, how happy are you? How would you rate your happiness from a family perspective? Relationships, career, health, money, personal growth, fun, social, and your physical environment at work. And they get this wheel essentially, and obviously they're looking for a balance ideally around, and the idea is that they can then talk to a team member and say, okay, well, it looks like your health in this particular example, perhaps you're a bit more worried about your health. So what could we do that might help you think about improving the health aspect? Is it a case of fitness or what is it? Let's think of some particular activity maybe, or some initiative that we could do that might help you to improve your health over the next month. So they do that on a regular basis. But what we would do is suggest that you combine this, or you use this maybe as part of a retention discussion. If you've got key employees, you might want to be thinking about having what we would call a retention discussion maybe every quarter. So that's not a review of their performance, but a review of a discussion really about whether they're happy in work, whether they've got everything they need. And again, this is a bit more of a qualitative type approach to measuring. But again, you've got your finger on the pulse then with your team members as to how they're feeling generally, and things that you might be able to work with them to improve on. And County Batteries have seen some tremendous impacts by doing this in terms of the engagement of their team members and the happiness of the team members. And what you might notice is it's not all about work. Some of this is very much about their personal lives as well. So they're bringing the two things together, recognizing that they need to consider both. So now in terms of measures and true measures, a couple of measures that you might want to think about, and we can help with these if you wish, but they can equally be done relatively straightforward. One, you may have heard of Net Promoter Score. It's something that's used a lot within measuring customer satisfaction, but we can do the same sort of thing for our employees. So we can do an employee Net Promoter Score, and essentially it relies on asking the question so this is if we're doing a more quantitative survey amongst our employees, and we would probably think about doing this if we've got maybe 10 or more employees, but you can do it with fewer as well. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend to a friend or to a friend, for example, to work at this company? So if we were asking, how likely would we be to recommend working at BizSmart out of 10, then the idea is that we would score them. And you have the way it works, the way the Net Promoter work bits is essentially we're interested in those that score 9 or 10 are the promoters, but equally those that score 6 or less are counted as detractors. And we can then take the 2 away, essentially the percentages away, and work out a Net Promoter Score. So we kind of ignore the passives. And you'll notice that this ties nicely back into the Gallup way of classifying team members into those that are engaged, not engaged, or actively disengaged. So you've got 3 groups of people. So you can start to think about then, okay, yeah, maybe we do have 1 or 2 detractors. Maybe there are things that we should do about it. Or equally, if we've got some passives, how do we really start to think about working with those to move them along? And that can go hand in hand with this set of questions from Gallup. And you can find these on the internet, or we will send these out to ScaleUp Club members as well within the slides. But these are a set of questions that Gallup have developed over the years to help, again, with a little bit more detail from that employee Net Promoter Score, to then think about, okay, what where particularly are we could we improve? And you'll see from the bottom, it starts off more with the basic needs type questions. I know what's expected of me at work. I've got the kit that I need to do my job properly. But then also, as we go up then through those questions to more, have I got the management support I need? Is the teamwork there within the business? Am I being able to develop and grow as an individual? So are there opportunities for me to learn and grow? And am I making progress in the last 6 months? And this is a nice set of questions to start to tease out then some areas that you might like to focus on across the team or with individuals. So as I say, both of those things that we can facilitate, and they're nice, relatively simple ways to start to get into the idea of measuring our employee engagement and happiness within it. But as I said at the beginning, I'm really pleased that George is able to join us from Team Performance Scan, because they've taken this a step further. George has worked, as some of us heard right at the beginning, he's worked with very high performance teams, including around the world yachting teams, but also Formula One teams and a number of very high profile and high performance teams. And they've developed a team performance scan that takes this sort of thing to a much deeper level, but equally is still something that's very straightforward to do within teams. And we've done this with a number of businesses that we work with now, again with teams where you've got more than a handful within the team, but you don't have to have huge numbers to make it a very valuable thing to do. So what I'm going to do now is to stop sharing and introduce George. So George, over to you.
It's an absolute pleasure to join you all. It's been a pleasure to support Kevin and BizSmart as well. And I've always been fascinated in teams from a really early age. And when I say a team, it could be a small organization. It could be a group of people that all are focused on trying to achieve a common goal. So that's kind of the definition of team. And just listening to Kevin's, some of the things that there are some measurements there. We spent quite a lot of time over the last 3 years trying to identify what are the ingredients that make a small organization or a team perform over and above perhaps other teams of similar experience or capability. So what's some of the ingredients that create those things? And I have no doubt as well that if we all think about when we are at our best at work, it's typically when our mood is at its best. It's how you're feeling. It has such an impact on performance, and that's that relation to happiness again. So I thought I'd just give you a very quick overview of what this tool is. If you'd like some more information, then just contact Kevin, or he can certainly put you in touch with me as well. But we're very pleased to support BizSmart with using this tool. So what Team Performance Scan does is it does go a little bit further into looking at the quantitative measurement without overcomplicating it. So it's a very simple app that you can send out to people on an email, and they can complete it on a phone or on a laptop, however they want to complete it, and it gives us some data. And what we ended up doing was we spent a number of years trying to identify what those key things are that make one team or one organization outperform another. And there's lots of factors, but when you look at the human factors, we started to distill it down, and we found that we ended up with 40 indicators, and we were able to put those into 10 themes. So we started to identify 5 that are more process related and 5 that are more behavioral. And when we started to go into this in more detail, we thought, you know what, let's measure this and let's test some teams against it. And with some teams that we know are performing very well and some teams that we know aren't, and let's see what the data brings out. So after that long journey, we've got to the point in the last sort of 18 months, really 2 years, where we've got a product that's being really helpful for organizations. So let me give you a very brief overview of this. What you've got is an overall score that, when you've collected data from your team, your employees, we get an overall score of how people feel that we are performing against those criteria. And I'll go into the criteria in a little detail. And then we're able to break it out into process and behavior. And this example also includes a leader score as well, which you don't have to have. So there's a little bit there about getting into some of the detail about what's going on. But the image that's most interesting is this one. So this starts to give us those 10 themes that I was talking about. So on the more sort of process side, you can see things like execution and plans, those things that Kevin were talking about strategy and execution and how important those things are. But we need to innovate. We need to be able to constantly ask ourselves, how are we doing? We need to measure and we need to adjust performance. And we need those sort of process related areas. But then we've got, and we consistently found that it's sometimes the harder stuff can be the more human stuff. Leadership, trust, respect, openness, and we debated for a long time about what to call the how are you feeling indicators, and we ended up with happiness because it's the best descriptor. So we ended up creating this model that we're able to measure against these indicators. And I want to kind of just give you one little bit of insight and a little bit more depth, because you might be thinking, well, great, but how on earth do I use this? But what we're able to do is the report that you generate as a result of asking your team to complete this, only takes 10 minutes to complete, is these are, for instance, this is a real team. This is a team that I work with down in London. They are a very high-performing team, but they have a thirst for improvement. And their top 3 scores, interestingly, were all related to happiness. So they celebrate success. It's an enjoyable experience being part of this team, and you're motivated to achieve the team's goals. So we're collecting that data. This is also giving us a little bit of a distribution. So we can see that we might have an average of 9, but have we got any outliers? Have we got any people that perhaps aren't feeling included? Then we've got some of the lowest scores. So this score, this is one of their lowest scores. They don't challenge the status quo. They don't challenge as well as they should do. Perhaps we should do things differently. Interestingly, in this example, you can see that the leader does feel that they do, but there's a disconnect between what the rest of the team do. And here's their lowest score. Team members give each other constructive feedback. So when you kind of look at, well, this is great collecting this data, but unless you do something with it, it's a little bit meaningless. So what this enables you to do is go, right, I'm now aware that actually we're not giving each other enough feedback. We're not giving each other enough constructive feedback. We're not talking to each other enough in that respect. So what can we do? So Kevin's example of a weekly chat about what can we continue to do? What can we do differently? What can we stop doing? All those areas can start to actually improve these scores. So you can repeat this exercise and actually start to build trends that show how some of these indicators are progressing. I thought I'd just share with you just for another minute, because this is a lovely picture what I've just shared with you. These are their 3 lowest scores, and they're still pretty good scores. So this team is performing very well, and they put a lot of effort in looking after their employees, looking after their staff. But I thought I'd share with you a rather lower one. And this is another client that I'm working with. I've removed the company name to protect the innocent and less innocent. And you can see a real disconnect here. First of all, low score of 5. And actually the process side, the plans, the execution, the innovation is okay. Where they're really struggling is almost, how are we really getting on with each other? And how are we making the most of each other's strengths and what we bring to the party? And anyone who's been part of a great team just can feel that connection with the team. And this team was hugely unconnected. So there's their wheel. We haven't put the leader version into this. They didn't want the leader with a single score, but you can see where the big low scores were around openness and trust. So it starts to help us think those are some areas that we need to work on. And here are their 3 highest scores, which actually is quite positive, but let me go on to some of the lowest scores. We don't disagree in an honest and productive way. So we either disagree in a dishonest and unproductive way, or we don't even do it in front of each other. We just disagree behind each other's backs, which is even worse. We don't give each other constructive feedback, and we don't even give each other positive feedback. So it starts to help us focus in and provide some support, but also for the boss to go, you know what, I need to think about how can I create this so that we start to operate some of these levers to improve things around here. And it doesn't require huge investment, or it doesn't require complex stuff to do. Sometimes it's as simple as getting people in a room and having a conversation, or going down the pub and just sharing one thing that you're pleased that a colleague's done for you in the last week. So it's trying to simplify it and not try and cover everything at the same time. So you almost think, well, what are my priorities? What things should I focus on? And therefore, just for the next few months, I'm going to look at that. And then maybe a few months later, you might think about something else. So that's a whistle-stop tour on TPS, Team Performance Scan. That could be another tool that could help you just collect that data in your organization and think about where are we strong, because we need to leverage those strengths, and where perhaps should we work a little bit harder.
Brilliant. George, thank you very much for that. All right, well, who should we start with? I'll tell you what, Peter, let's start with you, if that's all right. It's sort of in your field. So the topic is team engagement, but particularly with some thoughts around measuring and how we measure, should we measure, all of those good things around team engagement. So what would you like to kick us off with your thoughts?
So we don't do it. So
okay.
Other than as kind of part of that general discussion that we have with employees, how they doing, what's stopping them. We kind of have those monthly meetings and weekly meetings and daily stand-ups, and it kind of filters through that, but we don't measure it in any particular sense, I don't think. That's probably going to have to change as the team starts growing a bit more, particularly as we're all remote. So finding a way to do that, because we don't see each other that often, I think would be a useful thing for us to do, but it's not something we've put in place yet.
Yeah, good. And what struck you from the thoughts that I sent around team engagement?
So I think that there's lots of ways to kind of measure it. I think, generally, obviously having a happy team, or one that's at least engaged and finds purpose in their work, is something that generally will mean they're more productive. They're less likely to have them leave and then have hiring issues on the back of it. But it's kind of one of those, it almost feels like a nice to have. But when you're kind of down in the weeds trying to get everything else done, it drops down the to-do list somewhat.
Okay.
It's how do you make it kind of push it back up the to-do list?
Yeah. All right, good. Excellent. Thank you for that. So Matthew Parsons, what would you like to add to that?
Oh, our team engagement is, I suppose, a little bit different to a degree. We've got monthly objectives that we do run through with all employees from a working business side of things. So we make sure we're just sort of separating their goals and what they want to try and achieve, but also what we want them to achieve in the business as well as what we want them to achieve personally. So we're sort of ticking their boxes. I suppose going down a completely different avenue, obviously, with regards to retention and that sort of thing. Yeah. So getting them engaged from that perspective. We do track their performance with tickets in regards to what the sort of feedback is from clients. I'd say this is all more around benefits for me rather than for them, so to speak. And obviously then we're sort of reviewing with them regularly, sort of where they're at financially, making sure we're sort of ticking the right boxes for them. Obviously retention's a big play for us because everybody's after IT people currently. Yeah. So it's a big thing to, is it better to pay someone a little bit more money than to have to sit around and try and find somebody else, pay a recruitment fee, onboard them again, and the actual cost of time and effort to do that is quite a lot. So so Phil does all the objective meetings with them and generally we've got a very open door policy as well. So it could be better, more structured, certainly. And I suppose it does come down to, I suppose, your meeting rhythm, doesn't it? I suppose to a degree, as far as engagement.
Yeah,
every single day.
Yeah,
they're doing those very good touch points with the team, making sure they're happy, and they also know what's happening within the business. So the general feedback I have from the team is that if they miss out on not having a weekly overview with me in regards to how the business is doing, where we're going, or what we're doing, they all feel a bit lost, that they don't feel where they're going.
Yeah.
So I think it's very keen for them to know what's ahead of them, as well as, obviously all the things that we're doing currently is the future of what they want and where their ambitions want to drive them to, make sure we have the right opportunities to open doors for them. So we don't lose them.
All right. Good. Faith, what would you add?
For us, it's something that we've probably got more engaged with as a business in the last 12 months. We're very good, as you all know, I think by now, we're very good at KPI tracking and kind of the metrics for the business. But yeah, it's an area that we've put a bit more focus on probably for the last, I would say 12 months or so. So we've done like an employee engagement survey with the team. So similar to the EPS kind of concept, a few more questions in there, but yeah, generally, would you recommend?
Yeah.
And are you happy? And generally the feedback's been positive, but I think that comes off the back of having a much more open kind of environment with them and a much more open culture where we share, like a bit like Matt's saying, really, we share where the business is going and how they fit into that and kind of what we need from them, but also how they'll benefit if we can kind of reach that. And we do just a quarterly review of the business with the whole team. So that's definitely helped. But yeah, I'd agree with Peter. It's one of those things that it kind of, when things always get in the way of it. So it's probably better if we can get some more structure around actually sitting down with individual employees.
Yeah, good. And have you used, when you did the survey, have you used the outputs from that? What have you done with it?
Give myself a pat on the back. That's about it. No, we did say we would share them, but I haven't got around to kind of collating it in a sensible format. Rather than just running them through the questions and the scores, I do want to kind of do something with it. So yeah. That might be part of my challenge.
Yeah.
Later.
Okay. Yeah, because presumably you were asking for ideas for improvement or areas that could be improved as well. So yeah, and that's one of the things that can get frustrating for employees in organizations if they're asked to feedback things and then nothing seems to happen as a result of it. Then that can be a bit of a challenge. So yes, it might be worth picking up on that. All right, good. Matt Busby, what would you like to add?
Where do I start? Right. This was an interesting one, a bit of a challenging one for me to look at. Is our engagement with the team is better? We had the daily huddles fall off for a little while, and we got that back and our monthly meetings back in. So we're getting our rhythm back together. That's working well. If you to ask me, is the team happy? I'd say absolutely yes, they are. But are we getting the best out of them, the best productivity? Absolutely not. And I think is our relationship with our staff. The staff is okay. They're happy. I think it's Em and I that are absolutely bloody woeful. Is we have to just change the way we deal with the staff there. It's outbalanced. We kind of tiptoe around the staff. But if we were to measure exactly how happy the staff is, I wouldn't know where to start because we are a very small team. And if we anonymize something like that, I'd still know who was saying what. Yeah. And I just don't believe that they would tell me, actually, no, I'm really pissed off. I really hate that, because they wouldn't want to upset me, hurt my feelings or something like that. So, I think it starts with them and myself really to get this worked out, but it is, and was very thought provoking. And that's probably why I'm so flat today when I've had a look at this. And I just think, oh my God, we need a foot up the arse to get us back on track here.
Please don't take it that way. It's certainly not intended to.
But it is. It's like that. So, but I just don't know how to measure it so I get a real true picture. You know, when you get somebody from outside come in and do that, and still would we really get the truth of that?
Yeah. Okay. What do we think about that, Jeremy? It's quite a difficult challenge.
It is a quite difficult challenge. I mean, I think I'd kind of echo what other people said in terms of, you know, we're a small team. I think I have a good kind of feel for how the team engagement is. We have the kind of normal business rhythm stuff. We have daily stand-ups. We have weekly meetings. Everyone's encouraged to contribute to those meetings. But I think, you know, echoing what Matt just said, I mean, in order to get genuine feedback about the business, it needs to be anonymized. People need to be able to feel comfortable saying that the hard truths that you don't want to hear. So, and that's the difficulty, I think. You know, when it comes to actually measuring these kind of things, we have tried to do employee engagement surveys in the past, and no one filled them out. And because it's anonymized, you can't make people fill them out. So it just fell completely flat from that perspective.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Richard, have you, what would you add into this then?
Well, I was just thinking from what everybody's saying there that my job is really to make sure my managers are engaged and happy.
Yeah.
We've got a really close SMT. So, you know, we feel that through the team. You know, if there is any issues, we have our meeting rhythms. We've just gone off site and had our quarterly meeting for last quarter and the forecasting for the next quarter. What that showed us as a team was that even though we're close and we talk to each other on a daily basis, we don't know everything that's going on in each other's departments and what work we're actually doing. And the people who are working for them, we don't know what they're doing. So it was really good, an eye-opener for us in that quarterly meeting to see that. So we were actually doing some work around the staff engagement and efficiencies and productivity. And then, yeah, I did pass your book on to Mark. I didn't read it. So we are looking at how we can, understand an NPS score, you know, how the customers feel about the work that we do, but then we're trying to look at how, you know, the staff feel about working for us and that environment. And we sat down as a team and looked at not just the wages, but we have done that as well as an increase in what people do. But we also started looking at the holiday benefits and started putting some structure around the time of service that they've been with us, and then started putting extra holidays. So we started looking at that. So we as a team started looking at that package for people as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a difficulty, isn't it? It is difficult from team to team, business to business, culture to culture, and I don't think there's any one size fits all. And I think Jeremy's right as well. You know, it's difficult to get that true and honest feedback. I have done anonymous feedback once, and you know, 99% of it came back. You know, everything's great. There was only one person that came back with, which you knew who it was, some negative feedback. They retired, so it was fine.
Okay. Stu, can I bring you in here?
Yeah, obviously it's different for me because my team engagement is perfect because it's just me. So from that sense, it's kind of fine. I think the biggest lesson I've learned, having managed teams before, is it goes, and I think it's going back to what everyone else was saying about how it goes beyond just tracking kind of their performance from a business point of view, but actually taking time to kind of get to know them, kind of what makes them tick, what their family situations are like, and spending some kind of informal time, just sort of in some sort of social kind of occasion, whether it's over a coffee or kind of whatever, as a group of people. Because that's when you get to find out what kind of makes people tick and what really drives them to do the things they do and behave in the way that you do, or the way they do. So I know I've said before a couple of times that obviously, you know, when we had the kind of the two lads working with us, actually every Friday night at 4 o'clock we kind of logged off, and it was kind of beer o'clock. There was a sort of 15-minute review and then 45 minutes of just, you know, sitting with a drink over Google Meet and just kind of chatting and finding out, you know, about our weeks and kind of what we're doing over the weekends and that sort of stuff. And that really helped getting a positive frame of mind for Monday.
Yeah.
So I think that it isn't just look at the KPIs. It's important that they are, but it's looking at the kind of bigger picture, because actually, obviously, we're all human, and actually, something we all have good days, bad days, and to have that culture of kind of honesty and accountability, and sort of actually, I'm just not on it today. is kind of really important.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so yeah, definitely bring in culture and communication. Yeah, absolutely. Lisa.
So we're pretty good at it in certain ways. We run a annual survey out to the staff, and we've done that for as long as I can remember now, to be honest with you. We do use SurveyMonkey. It can be anonymous, but we also tell them that they can add their name on it as well. I think it might be slightly different for me because the nature of the people that we have are usually quite open and honest because they're talking to people on the phone all day selling. So they're quite quick to say when they're not happy with the situation. I was thinking about what Faith said earlier. We sort of run a traffic light system. So we publish all feedback that we've been given to the whole company so they can see what everybody said about, because they don't always agree. You know, we had one instance where they said, well, half of the company said they didn't want to have to listen to calls anymore. The other half of the company said they wanted to listen to more. So we put it in a traffic light system for them. So ready is, look, this isn't something we're going to implement in the company, and this is the reason why we don't feel it's appropriate. Brilliant. Amber is very much, look, we will get to this, but it's not our biggest priority, but we will still look into it for you. And green is, we're already starting to implement this now. That said, again, I think we can track when people are really unhappy because their results and their productivity dips massively, and you can see that live. So that's quite handy for us to be able to go back and actually speak to people and say, look, you know, what's going on today? You don't seem yourself. That said, I would say more recently it's tougher because we're taking on more people who are purely remote, and it's trying to get them to feel that they can still be as honest and open as everybody else, whether they're in the office or not. So we are having to change our approach slightly, and I don't think we've completely nailed that yet.
All right, good. And how many people are we talking about here, Lisa?
About 30 at the moment on our payroll.
Yeah. Anybody else want to pick up on something that either Lisa said or that's come out since you mentioned something? Yeah, Stu.
There was a really interesting discussion we had at ScaleUp Club on Tuesday about how do you make your outsourced people feel part of your team.
Okay.
Because actually, if you hire a VA, and you could buy some time from them, or maybe social media people like that, some of the kind of more external sort of marketing. See, they're fairly involved in your business, but they're kind of remote, and you're paying for a service. There's really interesting discussion about actually how do you make them feel part of your team so they're more invested in your culture, in the business. They're going to be more loyal to you because of because they understand your business better, that you're going to get better results because of it. And actually, so it's just worth thinking, particularly to someone like me, that does kind of work on their own and does have a bit of an outsourced team. It's how I make how it's not just about the people that you directly employ in the office or kind of whether they're remote or not, but actually it's kind of those third party people that actually you work quite closely with. And actually helping them understand your values, kind of where you're going in the business and all that kind of stuff. And that's like a different discussion, but actually I think it's a useful thing to think about as well.
Okay, yeah, very good. Anyone else want to add anything to this? Yeah, Mel, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's picking up on what Jeremy said about, no one kind of filling in the questionnaire. And I think a big thing here, well, what's really important is starting with intent. So whenever you do anything like this with your staff and your team, they need to really understand what the purpose of it is in the first place. Why are we actually doing this? Otherwise, it's just of no value or importance to them. So starting with intention, and then picking up really with what Matt was saying about that it kind of starts with himself and Emma, because they've got more of a kind of sort of friendly, bantery type environment. And I think maybe it's moving from that culture of everything's okay to actually asking your staff, well, how do you make everything, using Richard's word earlier, extraordinary? Because everyone will just go, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it's fine. Everything's fine, and may not want to be honest. And in your case, Matt, it may be a little bit around kind of, them concerned that you might take it personally, or that element of kind of defensiveness. And when you start something like this for the first time with your team, be prepared for the fact that it will be an opportunity to moan. And it's over time turning that into something that's more positive, but just be prepared for probably the negatives to come out first.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I mean, this is a broad, it's a really broad topic, because, we've just started with the idea of how do we measure it. But actually, it's really opens up the discussion around the whole thing around communication, culture, everything like that, doesn't it? Because that's what Mel's saying there. The intent is trying to get to the point where we've got a really truly engaged workforce that are really, really helping to drive the business forward. Depending on the size of our business, for example, the number of people as certainly as one factor, then we might want to do that in different ways. So we want to think about how can we create opportunities to make sure that people are having their say, essentially, and that we're listening to them and that we're doing something about it. And that's very much part of that communication, that culture. So if we do only have 2 or 3 people in the business, there is no point really in doing some huge, trying to do a net promoter score every 3 months or something and going, well, it's 87 this month and it's 76 last month. And it just doesn't make sense, does it? Whereas what makes much more sense would be to make sure you've created an opportunity on a regular basis, which could be monthly, it could be quarterly, to sit down with you individually with people and find a way that they can that you can encourage them to open up. And you're not going to start there if you've not done it before, and somebody's not going to suddenly open up and tell you all of their woes. But once you build that trust and people understand it, then maybe that will happen over time. But as you start to get larger in terms of the number of employees, then the question again becomes, how do we keep our finger on the pulse that we're not finding that there's a group of people that are disengaged? How do we make sure that happens so they have opportunities to feedback? But also then maybe we start to think a bit more about the quantitative measures. Then it might be that we use a Gallup 12 type set of questions, or we use Net Promoter Score, or we use the team performance scan that we use in BizSmart actually, and we do that. And even though we're only a team of 6, essentially we try and do that every quarter. Actually, probably every 6 months, really realistically, and we use it to get. It's not, although it is anonymous, sometimes it's quite clear who's done what or who's said what, but it gives us the opportunity to pick out one thing or maybe 2 things that we think, that's looking like the team generally is thinking we're a bit weak in that area. Maybe that's something we can focus on. And, Faith, you were mentioning you've just done that survey, and that might be one way that you would want to try and tease out of that is maybe 1 or 2 things that you think, we could work on improving that. That's come out of this, feed it back to the team and say, right, that's what we're going to focus on. And, maybe ask the team to help to improve. That doesn't all have to be, this is what I'm going to do because it's what I think is right. You can actually get the team involved in finding the solution. David, what did you take away from the information that we sent out and the discussion around it so far?
No, I think it's an interesting topic because it kind of came up for me. I think we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, didn't we, Kevin? Talked about when we had our sort of one-to-one. In the past, and particularly during COVID, we did surveys. And we surveyed far more than we're probably surveying now. We did some questionnaires around, how people felt around COVID and those sort of aspects. And I know we've done sort of, other employee surveys. We haven't necessarily actioned them yet, and that's probably something we need to look at. I think we went through a really sort of big, aggressive sort of growth phase. Lots of new people. We're going through a bit of a sort of a consolidation kind of sort of phase now, where actually we are trying to look at more of the engagement, productivity, efficiency type things. So I've not necessarily done anything more with it. I mean, we do a lot of stuff on the customer side in terms of surveying. We're going to reinstate a couple of the surveys we've got. We've also just just on appraisals for everybody. So that's also, there's some scoring metrics in there, employee satisfaction scores and things like that we've kind of built in, as well as their kind of objectives and things like that. So we've got a good feeling for the pulse across the business because of appraisals. And I sat in most of those appraisals. So now, arguably, me sitting in those might skew the numbers, but I think generally people are honest. If they're happy, they're happy. If they're not, they're not. No, I think there's more we could do, particularly when we're trying to get people as efficient and as productive and cross-functional. And there's some friction between some teams at the moment, not because it's on purpose, but just one team feeling left out, and it's like and vying for position and things like that. So I think the whole employee engagement, employee satisfaction, they're all kind of interlinked, really. I think. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, Steve, what would you like to add to that?
Okay, so we are probably a complete team, one team now. So we'll be starting recruiting for a second team. We've got a fairly consistent team of, we're trying to build our teams in fives. So we've got a fairly consistent, well-established team of 5 currently. Because we're sort of fairly open plan, you can pretty much sense the mood in the office, whether the team are coherent and happy, or if they're stressed and struggling. So it's fairly visual, but we've got a system in place whereby the last week of every month, our HR spends the afternoon, Friday afternoon, with the team members individually, and goes through a sort of review as to how the month's gone, really how they think. So we're actually going to incorporate the Gallup questions from the thing. So just add a few more in that we're currently doing. And then the week after the end of the month, we have our monthly meeting, basically, to discuss how the month's gone, what the targets are for next month, what jobs have gone well, what jobs haven't gone well. So yeah, I'm really sort of quite excited about it, about the change. I mean, generally we get good feedback from the staff, and depending on who's in the office, which Friday, it's fairly, it's fairly open and honest conversation. So, and as I'm not party to it, people can, say whatever they like without any, the understanding that they know that it'll get back to me, but in a, I guess in a filtered manner. So there's no sort of emotional concern with it, really. So and it's we've incorporated that into our employee handbook as well as one of the procedures. So yeah, I think we've got a new team member starting in September, the first week of September, a salesperson, which adds a different dynamic to the team, to the service team. So interesting to see how that goes. Okay.
Excellent. Very good. David Lincoln Lewis.
Engagement has been something that's been on our mind for a long, long time regarding staff, and even more now with the current financial situation we find ourselves in, this too many jobs and not enough people. We lost 30% of our workforce 6 months ago, and we've struggled to replace it since with the same qualified staff. So it was the understanding was trying to understand sooner with which staff members are likely to leave, whether there's anything we could do about it, whether we were aware of what they were doing, so that we could plan out. So when we put in the production coordinators, 2 coordinators into the workshop, that was done for 2 reasons, really. One, to be able to get a consistent view through a weekly meeting, through the workshop, exactly what it is we want to achieve that week, what's good, what's bad, all that type of thing. But the other thing was also to pick up some SP on satisfaction. So, I mean, we're a relatively small business with 1 building. we tend to gauge our satisfaction through our production coordinators. We were looking to put one in, but then that felt like that turned into basically into a shop steward situation, or that was a danger that it could turn into a shop steward situation. So splitting the responsibility meant that we had more control. So we do staff engagement as part of our any other business. I know we don't like any other business, but we have any other business at the end of our production meetings on a Monday every week to find out how people are feeling. We were doing I'm getting involved with TMB to do some form of customer satisfaction work. If we can make it work financially, because we have a small base of customers, and sometimes telesales doesn't work with a small base of customers. But we may also be spreading that out for staff satisfaction as well. So to make the numbers work so we can get the benefits from it. But staff engagement right now is really important due to the lack of, well, more than anything else, due to the fact that we're struggling to replace staff that leave. We haven't had anyone else leave since. However, I'd like to feel that I know what everyone's thinking. The only way I'm going to be able to get that is through the production coordinators. And eventually we will engage with the staff as like a toolbox talks, if you like. We try to do those as few as possible because they lose their impact, and announce another cost of living increase. You know as well as I do that'll please some people, not some others, but it's going to be. I think people will be happier that the business is recognising the rampant inflation that we're suffering from at the moment. So we are involved in engagement with the staff, and we really think it's really important.
Okay. All right, good, thank you, Nigel. What would you add?
I think as we get more involved in the discussion, the irony of this will become more and more apparent. As per my email earlier in the week, Kevin. Suffice at this point in time, our external communications are going along okay. They're much better than they once were. They're not perfect, but at least we've got regular communications going out now to various groups. Internally, we have nothing formal, nothing formalised. We have a weekly call on a Tuesday morning that we now call the Matters in Hand call, where we've tried to refine it to exactly that, really. What are the matters in hand? We're trying to, I personally don't think I communicate particularly well. So it's something I'm really aware of and something I'm trying to improve. I think we've gone through a period now with the staff where with people have started to hibernate before holidays. So they say that, they're not coming in for a fortnight now because they've got a holiday at such and such a time. Yeah. And and I understand that to a degree. We've been quite impacted with COVID in the last few weeks. I mean, I've had it at the beginning part of July. Funny enough, just after going to see the Stones in Hyde Park with 100,000 other people. So yeah, I get it to a degree, and I try and be as sympathetic as I can. But even my legendary powers have been stretched a little bit with it now. I'm in the office on a Friday. There's 6-7 desks, and I'm the only one that's in.
Right.
I've even left the dog at home this morning.
Yeah.
And it's just. It feels as if somebody somewhere is taking the mickey. There's an undercurrent of, if they can work from home, then I can work from home. The fact is that they work in Worcester, 30, 40 minutes away, and you live 2 minutes up the road. But I'm being unfair in asking the person that lives 2 minutes up the road to come into the office because they don't have to come in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, yeah.
So it feels like that we've developed that undercurrent. Yeah, I've gone along for a good period of time now thinking everything's rosy in the garden. And again, we all know you can jump up and bite you on the bottom. Yeah. So this is something we obviously came to a head earlier in the week. And so this landing on the same day, I found quite ironic, really.
All right.
But there you go. I don't want to go into too much because we'll be going into it a bit later on. But
okay.
So yeah, room for improvement. I think significant room for improvement.
All right, fair enough. Hemant, what would you add? What would you bring to the party?
I think it's a really, really important topic, and very, very important in terms of the smooth running. I mean, having read what you sent, it's all makes sense. But my challenge is applying that to a small company where there's literally just me and two others.
Yep.
And so we do have a monthly operations meeting. And that that's been going well. And also we have I have daily contact with both the admin and my fellow consultant. We do work with quite a few external freelance consultants as well. So I'm in regular contact with people, but even so even though we've got I think really good contact, in my case there's me, consultant and business coordinator. And Philippa, who's our business coordinator, seemingly everything was going. We were talking regularly, and she suddenly decided she was gonna leave completely out of the blue, and I didn't get any sort of sense, And when she'd raised issues, I'd tried to resolve them, and so the theory sounds really good, and me being sympathetic and open to listening to them and all the rest of it, and then suddenly you get something out of the blue because something's going on in their own head. So I agree that it's important to have this in place, and but this idea of sort of doing surveys and stuff, how do you apply that to a very small team?
So I think that's a really good point. But let's see what the room think, because when we've got handfuls and tens of employees like David Lyons, David Lincoln Lewis, maybe as well, it might make more sense to do something that's a bit more survey based and tracking a number. But when you've got two employees, doing a employee net promoter score or something and saying, oh yeah, it's come out at 87, well, or 65 or whatever, it's kind of it's not quite meaningless, but it's close to meaningless. So what do we think as a group for how can we apply this with when we've got smaller teams, essentially? What do we think? Who wants to pick up? Maybe go on.
I'll pick up. Yeah. So I think what I think we try and check for is changes. So okay, a score of 87% might be not irrelevant, but actually, if that individual's score is then declining or increasing, then you can spot the change. So by measuring it, you've then got at least some way of going, okay, well, last quarter it was for this particular employee 8 out of 10, and now it's 7 out of 10, now it's 6 out of 10. And therefore there's something that you can kind of pick up on because you can spot a trend, even if it is a low number, and probably grouping it with other stuff. So for example, some of the employee satisfaction stuff was grouped into an appraisal. So it's one of the appraisal questions. So instead of actually it being an email that lands into somebody's inbox that says we want you to fill a survey out, it's grouped with something else. So that's probably
all right.
Well, go.
Thank you, David. Steve, I think you were about to say something.
Yeah, as I say, we do ours through our HR person. Probably one of the best things that I did employing a HR person. She only comes in part-time, but she's very, very good with people and understands people's moods, etc. So with the questions, we won't sort of just deliver a questionnaire. We had the discussion about it last night actually, and it would. So she will ask probably 8 out of the 12 questions, so it doesn't feel like an interrogation, and have them in a conversation, a social conversation, really. So the person doesn't necessarily know that they're, being surveyed as such, and then report back the answers. With regards to engagement, that really depends upon what week we had. Just to give you an example, I think it was Tuesday night, one of the engineers had hit someone had reported a problem in, and it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We actually finished that 11:45. So an engineer's been from 9 o'clock in the morning, finishing at 11:45 at night. And, I was obviously there with him. But that particular engineer is one of the engaged ones, extremely sort of positive, and understands the way the business works, etc. So, it wasn't really an issue. Some of the other ones that we've got, I'd say that they're engaged when they're there, but are very much 9 to 5. So, it's 1 minute to 5. Don't be stood near the doorway, otherwise you'll get run over. It's a race for the car park. It's a bit like the Le Mans,
Yeah, the Le Mans start. Yeah, the standing start.
That's right. Yeah, the standing start. So, we have sort of hots and colds, really. But I think having those questions asked and sort of get a feedback, a feel from it from a conversational point of view is how we deal with it in our team. It does work quite well. Just on another thing that I've written down here, the team meetings that we have, and this is really for David Lincoln Lewis's benefit. By your suggestion about engaging people in the Scrum meetings by making each person chair it has been fantastic, and it has really helped people's engagement within the business as well. Especially linking up the marketing team with the engineering team. So that's been really positive.
Good. Yeah. Any other thoughts for him out on the engagement side with small teams?
Yeah, I do really. I mean, in line with what David was saying earlier on, and trying to bring things in with other things rather than creating a specific staff, especially with quite low manager staff. I tend to find return to works to be a useful tool for engaging with staff.
Yeah.
Even if people are off because they're not ill, because they've had to go away from the office for some other reasons other than themselves not being well, it's always a good opportunity to gauge how they're feeling and what they're thinking and how we can support them in that process. And it's amazing when you have an out of work experience, which basically, as long as the return to work process is perceived as being fair, that's the important part. It isn't being seen as not discriminatory, but coming down on somebody because they've done something wrong. It's amazing how engaged people are. Yeah. I get so much out of my return to work meetings when it comes to how people are feeling and things. It's unbelievable. As long as you don't try and hold it to a 15-minute meeting, you've got to give it enough time so that you allow people to open up in those situations. You can actually get some really good information. So I would say build it into other things, but pick the things you're going to build it into.
Very good, very, very good advice. And I think that's that for me is there's got to be a gradual transition, but when it's about giving people the opportunity to have their say, isn't it? To feel that they're listened to and that something's done as a result of that. That's really what this is about. In the early stages of a business's growth, that's got to be about sitting down and having those conversations with people in a non-formal, non-sort of rigid way, hasn't it? It's got to be like that. As we get more and more employees, we may want to bring in more of the survey idea, where it is maybe a little bit more of a survey, and you might even get into anonymized surveys and things like that, and tracking the stats and the numbers and things. But still with the aim that you're giving people the chance to have their say, feel they're listened to, and acted on. So bringing in opportunities, whatever size of business you are, for people to really be involved, to collaborate on issues and challenges, for example. So in your weekly meetings, having that section where people can address a challenge together, like we do in smart boards, rather than basically being told what the answer is to an issue or told to do things, is definitely part of it. And it clearly links really closely with overall communication within a business, and that culture of everybody's valued. And that's where we're trying to get to, isn't it? Don't forget to take a look at www.bizsmarts.co.uk to access a great range of resources to help you in your scale-up journey. So that's bizsmarts.co.uk, which is bizsmarts.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.